The two-lane highway that cut through the countryside was almost always empty at night. Trees lined the road, their twisted branches arching overhead, casting shadows that moved and stretched with the moonlight. Locals avoided the road after dark. Rumor had it that strange things happened there, especially around the spot where a deserted car had been left years ago. It was early November when Ethan and his best friend Josh decided to take that road home after a late night at a friend's place. It would cut 20 minutes off their drive, and they thought the haunted highway tales were just superstitions. Besides, Ethan was curious. He'd always heard about the phantom car and wanted to see if there was any truth to the legend. As they cruised along, the night was pitch black, and a thick fog started to gather. The road felt endless, and the quiet of the night pressed against the windows. Suddenly, there it was. Parked on the shoulder just off the highway. A car, old but somehow gleaming, like it had been freshly painted. The headlights caught its silver paint and smooth curves, and it looked perfectly intact. Too perfect. "Dude, pull over," Ethan said, nudging Josh. Josh hesitated but pulled over a few yards ahead. They climbed out of their car, leaving their headlights on. As they walked back, they could feel the air growing colder, the silence around them intensifying. The car was a model from the 70s, but it looked like it had just rolled off the assembly line. Ethan reached out, running his fingers along the cool metal, marveling at its pristine condition. But as his hand slid down the side, something strange happened. The paint began to peel away under his touch, revealing rusted, corroded metal underneath. "What the?" he murmured, pulling his hand back. Josh, standing a few steps behind him, watched as the entire car seemed to decay before their eyes. The shine dulled, and flakes of paint began falling off in chunks, revealing rusted metal and patches of corrosion. It was as if the car were aging in fast forward. And then they saw it, the smudged handprint on the passenger window. Dark, almost like dried blood. "Okay, this is messed up. Let's get out of here," Josh said, taking a step back. Inside, he could just make out a figure sitting in the driver's seat, head down, unmoving. The figure wore, but Ethan, entranced, couldn't tear his eyes away. He leaned in closer, peering through the window. A tattered, faded shirt, but its face was obscured by shadow. "Hey! There's someone in there," Ethan whispered. Just as he said that, the figure's head snapped up, and he saw it clearly, hollow eyes, sunken and lifeless, staring back at him. The face was twisted into a gruesome smile, teeth bared and stained dark. Ethan stumbled backward, a scream catching in his throat. Then, suddenly, the passenger door creaked open, as if inviting them inside. "Ethan, don't," Josh pleaded, pulling at his friend's arm. But Ethan felt something, an intense compulsion, a pull he couldn't explain. It was as if something in his mind urged him to take a step closer. He shook his head, snapping himself out of it. But just then, a voice, raspy, like fingernails scraping on metal, whispered his name from the driver's seat. "Ethan." They turned and bolted for their car, but as they ran, they heard footsteps behind them. Slow, deliberate footsteps echoing in the night, drawing closer. The fog thickened, and every time they glanced back, the figure was closer, moving with a distorted, jerking motion, like it was struggling to keep up with their pace. They reached their car, slamming the doors shut and locking them, gasping for air. Ethan fumbled for the keys, his hands shaking. When he finally got the engine started, the headlights illuminated the empty road ahead. But as they sped off, they saw the phantom car in the rearview mirror, rusted and broken, yet somehow keeping pace with them. And then, without warning, the figure was standing in the middle of the road, directly in their path. Ethan slammed on the brakes, but they went right through it, as if it were nothing but smoke. They sat there, breathing heavily, hearts pounding. When they glanced back in the rearview mirror, the car was gone. But the smell lingered, a foul, metallic odor that clung to their car, filling the air. They didn't speak a word for the rest of the drive. Once home, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, he dreamed of the figure, the twisted smile, and the whisper of his name. Days passed, but the nightmares didn't stop. Each night, he'd see the car, gleaming and new, the figure inside staring at him through the windshield. Finally, he decided to look into the history of the car. He discovered that it had once belonged to a man named Ray Leckard, a psychotic who had been convicted for multiple murders, and had died in prison. They said he'd painted the car himself, meticulously, even as the authorities took him away. After his death, his car had disappeared from the impound lot, vanishing without a trace. That car was said to reappear on dark highways, luring in anyone who dared to stop. And anyone who saw it would never be the same. Ethan tried to forget, but every night, he felt its pull, like it was calling him back to the highway, back to the place he'd first seen it. It was only a matter of time before he'd return. Because that's what it did. It drew people in, haunted them, until they couldn't resist. And when they came back, they never left.